Thank you very much. I really love Vancouver and the greater Vancouver and BC. I've been to many municipalities in BC, small, large, all kinds. And actually one of the things that I'm always amazed is that people from small municipalities, they think they have nothing to do with transit. I think part of the referendum is to say, no, this is about everybody. Any municipality with 5,000 people, they need transit as much as a municipality with 1 million. Maybe they don't need a subway. Well, I think no one really needs a subway. But they can do with a bus. And this morning I was at VeloWorks, and it was interesting while I was at VeloWorks because I saw a presentation from the Mayor Dean Fortin from Victoria, and they did a survey. Why is it that people don't bike? And they said the number one, safety. Safety, by far. We got to make walking and cycling safe for everybody. And then the number 2 was weather. My God, the weather in Victoria is like paradise. And it's and all over BC actually. So it's so then I started thinking, you know, that's when people say they don't walk or they don't bike, or even take public transit if they can. Here in the greater Vancouver, this is because of the weather. That reminded me that when I was working in the Caribbean, and they said, oh, we cannot walk or bike because it's too hot. And then I got on the plane and I came back to Toronto. So then I realized that maybe we got to learn. That 2 weeks ago, I was in Copenhagen with 35 city leaders from across the U.S. We brought leaders from Detroit and Miami and San Jose and Akron and many cities with the Knight Foundation. And we wanted to show them a city, you know, they say is the happiest city, you know, in the world. And actually I go there a lot because I've been senior consultant with Gil for a few years. And I thought, you know, maybe when you go to Copenhagen, you're going to find people jumping up and down on the streets. Maybe that's why they're so happy. And but no, it's about having nice, cozy places. And actually someone wrote, they're almost nearly perfect people. But one of the things why they are so happy is because they walk, and they bike, and they take public transit, even if they have cars. So these are our 35 friends from across the U.S., and they learned something, that there is no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. You put on the right clothing, and then you go on, as it's not a big deal, and they continue. But of course, it is about priorities, because when it snows in Copenhagen, first they plow the sidewalk. Then they plow the bikeway. Then they plow the streets. I mean, from the point of view of vulnerability, who's the most vulnerable? The pedestrian. So it has to be and then the cyclists, and then the transit users, and then the cars. And then everybody can walk and bike safely and take public transit. So it's not such a big deal. People, when I was walking here, I saw a tweet from someone that was tweeting one of you to someone else and said, oh, it's raining. And then someone said, oh, don't worry, you're not going to melt. Here, they don't melt either. But now, of course, when I show you images from other cities, you're going to say, oh, Gil, here in BC, we are different. We got nothing in common with Copenhagen or Bogota or New York. We are unique. Yeah. Let me tell you, you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. So I'm going to show you hundreds of images, some cities that are bigger, some are smaller, some are wealthier, some are poorer. But nevertheless, we can learn from more. But this is not like on the computer, that we copy and paste. No, it's not about copying. It's about how to adapt and improve. The other day, you probably have heard of Shania Twain. She comes from a small town called Timmins, Ontario, 43,000 people. And the mayor called me and said, Gil, you got to come and see this park. And I said, I'll go, but why do you want me to see the park? She said, because it's a pilot park. And when you came 2 years ago and you spoke about New York, and I said, she got it. I was talking about New York, 8 million people, pilot projects on the streets, and she got the concept of a pilot, and she did a pilot park in a community of 43,000. So everything that I'm going to show you is doable in any community in BC if we have the attitude that is about adapting and improving. And of course, we got to move fast. In many communities, we're moving at the speed of the turtle. And why we need to move faster? Because in so many ways, well, we're growing very fast. I mean, the greater Vancouver has 2.8 million. It's going to grow by 1 million in the next 20, 25 years. It's a huge growth. So, and also, you got to benchmark. This is one of the things that I worry about good communities like BC, that people start benchmarking with cities that are worse than you. I mean, of course, any community in BC, if you benchmark, if you want to compare yourself with communities that are worse, you can do a list of 1,000, 2,000 communities or more. And then it's good for the short-term ego. But it's bad in the long term because you're going to start looking like those. But if you benchmark with the ones that are the best communities in the world, according to the size and climate and whatever. So in everything, what is the best in parks? What is the best in mobility? What is the best in public transit? Eventually you're going to look like those. And really, there is no reason why Vancouver or anyone in BC would not be as good as any in the world. I mean, change is hard. In Copenhagen also it was hard when, the car was taking over there also in the 60s and 70s, and where they were going to create the first pedestrian street. People said, what? We don't want any pedestrian streets. We have too many cars. And the weather is horrible. It's hot in the summer. It's cold in the winter. It rains all year. It rains more than Vancouver, actually. But the number one reason why they didn't want, they said, walking, that's not part of our culture. That's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy and they like to be on the streets. But we are Danes, and the Danish, we're quiet and we're cold and we don't go out. The news is that the Danish now are more Italian than the Italians. They love the pedestrian streets in the winter, in the summer, with rain, with sun. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. All of a sudden, they went from a car invasion to people places. They turned 18 parking lots into these people places. Look, in the middle of the winter, people with scarves and gloves and things, the pedestrian streets, they are as used as in the winter as in the summer. The only thing is that in the winter, they walk a little bit faster. So we have measured how long people stay and whatever, and those are the things. But there is no reason why any community here would not do. I mean, why do they bike? Is it because they are very environmental and everyone in Copenhagen is a tree hugger? 1% for environmental reasons. Number one is because it's safe, it's fast, and it's convenient. That's why we need to make it. The survey that the mayor of Victoria was saying, number one, safety. That's why people do it. And safety is because it's separate. It has a physical separation. There are many ways to have physical separations, but there has physical. At one level is for the cars, then there is about 10 centimeters higher for the bikes, and then another 5 or 10 for the pedestrian. And then it's safe for everybody. So and also they do nice parks. And tonight I'm not only going to talk about mobility, I'm going to touch a few things on public space, because everything is linked to everything. But for example, this skateboard park is great, but not only because it has this beautiful tree on it. When you do parks, playgrounds for children, skateboard, why do they have so many children? You know why? Because they got cozy places for their parents. Otherwise, their parents go and they get bored because there's nothing for. But if there is a place for them to meet, to socialize, to have a coffee, then they're going to tell their children, let's go to the skateboard park. So parks are very important, but these places, this is about creating nice places. It's also about public transit. I'm going to talk about how to create great places at each one of the transit stops. So we got to start thinking, are the sidewalks and the parks and these places, public space, are they important? Maybe for us it is, but it's not so obvious. I go to many municipalities and I show them these kind of sidewalks and playgrounds. And you know what they tell me? Gil, go do some fundraising. But I go to the same municipality and I show them a pothole, and they go crazy about potholes. They think maybe a car is going to fall, or a giraffe is going to come out of here. Oh, I hadn't seen this giraffe so close. But people go crazy, and the media plays into this. TV station, hire this woman, the TV station. What does the woman do? Goes and measures the potholes. She has a section twice a week showing the potholes. And then the citizens, they get organized around potholes. And when finally the city takes care of the potholes, then the engineers and the politicians and everybody goes to celebrate. Can you imagine if we place as much emphasis on the sidewalks and the playgrounds as we place on potholes? So then when I said this, we got to start thinking, what is the role of the streets that is so magic around that even a pothole makes us go crazy? Let's think for a minute. When we take a look at any city from the air, the largest public space. Public space is the public that belongs to everybody, young and old, rich and poor. It doesn't matter. Are the streets. I mean, in many cities, in most cities, the streets are 20 to 30% of the city. In most cities, it's between 70 and 90% of the public space are the streets. So we really got to rethink, how are we going to use that public space that it belongs to everybody? Is the best use just to move cars 24/7, 365 days of the year? Or can we do other uses? I mean, in Toronto, even with this horrible mayor that we have, last week we had an open streets. The most iconic streets, Bloor and Yonge, we opened them to the people and closed them to cars. But then changing mindsets that we can use streets, we got to be able to use streets for other than just moving cars when we got these kind of numbers. So we really got to start thinking, we have seen, I'm sure most of you have seen different kinds of this graph where walking, cycling, and public transit takes up less space. So tonight we're also talking about democracy and things like that. I mean, here in Oros, there used to be a river going through here, and 40 years ago, people said, we got to be efficient. So when they wanted to be efficient, people said, why don't we put a road on top of the river? And they paved it. But that was 40 or 50 years ago. Now people want to attract the best people to the cities. It's not just about efficiency, but it's creating quality of life. And 7 or 8 years ago, someone said, wasn't there a river going down here? And they brought it out. Same store, same street. So where would you like to live? In this city or in this one? They are competing with Vancouver and North Vancouver and Victoria and everyone. How to attract and how to retain their people. We got to decide if we're building streets for cars or streets for people. When you're going to grow by 1 million people in the next 20 years, you're going to decide, are we going to have streets that look like car storage or actually streets that help create community? We build these parking lots that work like a gigantic vacuum that suck the life out of the city, or we put street level activity and then the parking in the second, third, and fourth. I mean, change is hard. Don't think that change is hard only here in BC. When the mayor said, should we make this street pedestrian? There were 93 cars parked. The guy in this restaurant said, if you take away the parking, I'm going to go broke. But you got to learn something. When you go to the public on any topic, the key issue is, what is the general interest? And the general interest must prevail over the particular. Any discussion. So when people say, but my sales, no. We're not talking about your sales. We're talking about the general interest. And the other thing, you will never be able to convince everybody. Some politicians hide behind, there is some concern. There will always be concern. If you want decisions by 100% unanimous, you will have to water down change so much that it's not going to be change any longer. So they made it pedestrian. And you think anyone went broke? 20,000 people buy more food than 93 cars. So this is the idea. It's about changing mindsets. We got to change how we think. We got to ask, for example, the children. The children don't have any baggage, so they tell you what's on their mind. We were going to do the other day a visioning. For example, now with public transit, let's go to each one of the transit stops. Let's do placemaking. We ask these children, let's do a visioning map of a park. But then we do it differently. For example, we use many different techniques. One, we got these children, 30 kids. We put them in a classroom, 8 hours. First 30 minutes, we gave them a lesson on how to take photos. So each one brought either a digital camera or we gave him one. And we split the 30 kids in groups of 5. And then after we taught them how to take photos, then we took them to the park. Initially, we gave them these squares so that they could practice how to, don't put the object right in the middle or it's going to be a boring photo and so on. And they started taking photos, the things they liked and the things they didn't like in the park. 90 minutes taking photos. They loved it. And then they went back to the classroom, and each group had a computer. So now they had photos of the things they liked, the things they didn't like, and they were downloading photos of things that they would like to have in the park. And at the end of the day, we had a group vision of the park. Those kids, they will never see parks the same way for the rest of their lives. They were like sponges, absorbing so much. People say, great that you work with children, because they're the future. No, it's not about the future. If we teach the children very, very well, what happens? They go home and then they educate their parents. That's the idea. This is about changing mindsets. The children, you tell them how to do recycling, and they go home and they tell you, Dad, don't mix plastic bottles with paper. So it's about this kid, Edgar, 13. We asked another group of kids. The other one was in Guelph, Ontario. This one is, I think, Chihuahua, Mexico. And we said, why don't you draw how would you like your community to be when you have your parents' age and you have children of your age? And he started drawing. He wrote, I want few cars, more people walking, and more people cycling. And then he drew an area for people walking, for people cycling, for cars, and for buses. He's only 13, but he knows that if we mix pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrian is going to get injured. If we mix cyclists with buses and cars, the cyclist is going to get injured. He knows that each one needs separate space. And then he drew public parks with street-level activity. How many here are studying urban planning? I hope you study very, very hard, because now the 13-year-olds can summarize Urban Planning 101 in one drawing. I mean, if we have communities like this, we will have pretty good communities. So when people say it's not rocket science, no, today we're not talking about rocket science. We're talking about how to create cities for all. So that's why I'm so happy that with the university and with TransLink that have invited me to be part of Rethinking Transportation, new voices, new ideas. So I want to talk about these two big topics, sustainable mobility and public spaces. But since we don't have all night, then I'm going to focus mostly walking, biking, public transit. And maybe another time you will invite me to speak about parks and public spaces, because they are so critical, they are so important. I mean, we do so many things in the parks. For example, I was in Grant Park in Chicago when the U.S. was playing the World Cup. And it was amazing. People go to now they feel they belong. But it wasn't just Chicago. Look in Seoul, South Korea, and in Bogota, and in Copenhagen. I was there when they were just playing the elimination. Finally, they didn't make it. But look at how many people go out to the public spaces. And it's not just about games. Well, this is when Germany won. All the parks. You know, also political reasons. All of a sudden in Spain, 40% youth unemployment. They go to the streets. Where do they go? To the public spaces. In Tahrir Square in Cairo, Tiananmen Square, the Occupy Wall Street. I mean, public spaces are so important. And it's not only about political, it's not only about sports. But look at this, 2 million people in Rio, but it wasn't the World Cup. It was the Pope, which in itself, now he can be a saint, because to be a saint, you got to do a miracle. And this was the first miracle that he did. He got 2 million Brazilians to love an Argentinian. I mean, the Brazilians really hate Argentinians. You know, they hate them so much that Germany beat Brazil 7-1 in the semifinals, and Germany played Argentina in the finals, and all Brazilians were rooting for Germany. So this is quite a miracle. Those are the miracles of the public spaces. I mean, we got to think in the public spaces, children, for them playing is learning, helps muscle strength, coordination, cognitive thinking. We got to do a much better job at promoting parks. Every citizen in BC, in the world, should have a park within walking distance. Then we can talk about small parks and medium parks and so on. And by the way, we are organizing this conference, so save the date in San Francisco. So I'm going to talk about what area native cities is, some of the problems, the solutions, the benefits, and how to move from talking to this. So what is area native? Area native, here it says walking, cycling, but no, it's not about parks and transit. No, these are the means, not the end. The end is how can we contribute to recreate some vibrant cities with healthy communities, where people are going to be happier, enjoying their parks and their public spaces. And when I'm in the city, people say, oh, Gil, can my children walk to school? Can my grandparents bike to get eggs or milk? Can we walk to get public transit? Look, you don't have to be a PhD in transportation. Follow 3 simple steps. Step number 1, think of an 8-year-old that you love. Your daughter, your son, your nephew, brothers, sisters. Once you have that child in mind, go to step number 2. Think of an older adult that you also love. And when you have the older adult in mind, go to step number 3. Would you send the child and the older adult across the intersection? Would you send them walking to take public transit or biking to get eggs or milk? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not, and we got to do it better. I mean, what if everything that we did in BC, in the streets, in the sidewalks, in the parks, everything had to be great for an 8 and for an 80-year-old? Then it would be good for everybody, from 0 to 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. And we got to start building cities for all. So it's... Well, someone might say, why did you skip this video? It's about sustainable happiness. But we don't have, we don't have the sound. It's okay, even without the sound, you can get the idea. You know, when people say it's not rocket science, it's not. This is what we need. Sustainable happiness. He parked his dog. In so many ways, happiness is so hard to define, almost impossible to measure, but that's also our goal in life. So when we're talking about issues also like public transit and walking and cycling, it's also about happiness. I mean, I know that we seem to be facing a perfect storm. We got traffic congestion and climate change and public health crisis. I mean, public health from the point of view of depression, anxiety, obesity crisis, and we got economic crisis, and everything seems to be at the same time. We feel overwhelmed, as if it wasn't enough. We got population growth, and also we're living longer. But this is a great opportunity. So, I mean, the population is growing so much. Canada, I mean, the world population was only 1 billion 200 years ago. Now it's more than 7 billion, and it's going to go to 9.5 billion. The over 80 is going to multiply by 4. We're living longer. I mean, here in Canada, we're going to grow in the next 30 years by 7 million. That's as much as the 5 largest cities in the country. How are we going to grow? I mean, that's like 2.5 times Metro Vancouver. Metro Vancouver is going to grow by 1 million in 25 years. That means not only do we have to improve the communities that we have today, but we got to create great communities for these 1 million people. Great opportunity for all of us. Let's not look only as a challenge, but it's a great opportunity. And we're living longer. Does anybody know anyone over 65? You know, that's very new. Half of the people that have ever lived to 65 are alive today. Half of them. That is something very, very new. So we got to rethink about older adults. Because the older adults, I mean, I remember about 8 years ago, I ran the marathon here in Vancouver. And I was running, and I saw these 65s and 75 going by me. I felt so bad. But we got to get used to it. Look, if we had been, this is the life expectancy on this side. If we had been born 150 years ago, the life expectancy was only 41. But it's not only Canada. Every country in the world, 150 years ago, there was no country with the life expectancy above 45. Today, there is no country with life expectancy below 45. It's amazing how this changed so fast. It's very clear we have learned how to survive, and when we see all of these issues, it's clear also that now we need to learn how to live. And that's what all of us have to do, is learn how to live and promote a different way of living. Because this is about how do we build the cities? How do we get around? We are, for example, we're amalgamating schools all over BC. Why do we amalgamate schools? Because we save one custodian. Instead of having 2, we got 1. But then the schools are bigger and the catchment area is bigger. So it becomes drive-to schools. Our kids have friends and it's drive-to friends. So it's an issue that is not about the cash flow of the Board of Education. It's an issue that has to do with our quality of life. The US and Canada, both together, 27% of the trips are less than 2K, and almost half are less than 5. I mean, half of the trips can be done within 20 minutes on a bike ride. Because when you talk about these things, people say, but what am I going to do if I got to go 50 kilometers? No, you're not going to do 50 kilometers on the bike. But let's worry about this half of trips that are less than 5K. Or this third that is within a 20-minute walk. I mean, people used to walk or bike to school. Now people are being driven to school. They say, oh, for safety. Cities are safer now than any time in the last 50 years. But then, there are some crazy things. How long do we have? Till 7 to 9? Okay. Just to tell you an anecdote, for example. A professor at U of T did a study. You know, a newspaper in Toronto called the Toronto Sun has a murder every day on the paper. And this professor said, how can you have a murder every day when there's not even a murder in Toronto every week? And then he did a research. And he found that if they don't find a murder in Toronto, they look at Ontario. If they don't find one in Ontario, they look in Canada. If they don't find one in Canada, they look in the US. And actually, 63% of the murders that they reported were in the US. Can you imagine how sick that to sell more papers, you got to report murders? But then it influences, because then people, all of a sudden, they say, oh, you know, a person was murdered in McAllen, Texas. What do we care? You know, it's thousands of kilometers away. But nevertheless, people see murder. And then they get psyched that their kids are going to be murdered. So, I mean, look at how much we could grow in cycling. I mean, there are so many symptoms. People, even in the beautiful weather of BC, they drive to the gym to walk on the treadmills. Other people, you know, they go to these 24-hour gyms. They pay a monthly fee, and they go. What do they do when they are inside? They go up and down the stairs. They could have gone up and down these ones for free. These are symptoms, you know. So we gotta create cities for all people. How are we gonna get around? So it's not only a challenge, but it's a great opportunity. And this is not just an issue of money or engineering. It's about how do we want to live? How do we want to live? This is Melbourne. They used to be all factories 30 years ago. And in just 30 years, they got rid of all the factories. There was a river totally polluted. Now it's clean, the Yarra River. So we got to recreate cities, and we need some ingredients. It's like if we're going to do a pasta. If we boil water and we don't put anything, it's going to be spiceless. People don't like spiceless pastas. So then we get ingredients and we do a nice pasta. The cities also have ingredients. People don't like to live in spiceless cities. The other day I was with a group of Asians in Mississauga. And these older adults, they were telling me, they said, oh, Gil, you know, we need to improve the city. It's good that you're going to advise. And then I said, okay, why do you think the city needs to be improved? I said, because all of our children are teenagers and they want to live. They want to go to Toronto. So I said, you know, that's part of the culture. The teenagers, they want to move away from home. They said, no, they don't want to move away from home. They want us to move with them. And I said, why do they want to move? They said, oh, because there is nothing to do in Mississauga. It's a spiceless city. People don't like to live in spiceless cities. Actually, I'm sure that if you look at transit coming into Vancouver, you will see that Friday evenings, a lot of people coming from the suburbs, and Friday at midnight going back home. Much more. Why? Because it's more spice. So what are some of the ingredients of a city for people? The number one is walking. Any city. We are pedestrians. That's how God created us. You know, when we walk, we use all our senses. You know, we walk at around 5 kilometers an hour. We see the children playing. We hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee shop and we smell the aroma. Every trip begins and ends by walking. Every one of you came walking. You walk to your car, you walk to the bicycle, you walk to public transit, you walk to the places. So walking should be a priority, but we have not been building cities around that priority. This is how we've been building them. It's totally crazy. Everywhere. This is an insult. The little space for the pedestrian, and we encroach. I was in Kuwait, and you know, this is how they do. Billions of dollars for highways and nothing for the pedestrian. I mean, we're telling this woman every day that she's in this sidewalk, you are a second or third class citizen. We need to dignify the pedestrians. And then this one gets hit, and people say, oh, he was probably talking on the telephone. Or it was jaywalking, as if he deserved to be killed. Oh, it was jaywalking. So, and similar to walking is cycling. I think cycling is just a more efficient way of walking. If we're going to go 1 kilometer, we walk. But if we're going to go 3 or 5, then we take a bike. But both, you see people eye to eye. Both have no noise, no oil. This was in Victoria. And then, but if we're going to go further out, we take public transit. I mean, this is the perfect link, walking, cycling, and public transit. I mean, I love that I go to the public. I come to the airport, take Canada Line, $9. In Toronto, we're doing a Canada Line from the airport. It's going to open next year, $28. Don't get any ideas of raising it to $28. But this is great. But you can have the best public system in the world. Let's assume the referendum is approved, and you're going to invest all the... Public transit will never pick us up in front of our house and drop us off in our place of destination. So we're going to need to walk or bike to public transit or take feeder buses. But it's a lot cheaper for the system if more people walk or bike to the system than if you have to have too many feeder buses. So then we got to make those linkages. And then the glue is the public space. Because, I mean, if we just have the transit stop, it's nice. But what if we put a water fountain, and we sell papers, and we sell coffee, and we have a table where people can play chess, and we have a public telephone, and so on? We create a place. We create a destination. So every transit stop has the possibility of being a destination. We really got to invest in the public realm. That's also one of the reasons why it's so exciting when people, instead of doing a subway, very expensive, you do an LRT or you do a BRT, because you have so much money left over that you can improve the public realm and you can do a lot of other things. So then you have sustainable mobility. You got the public transit, you got people walking, people cycling. I mean, they got to be best friends. I'm not saying that this is the future of the car industry, but it's changing very, very rapidly in so many ways. I mean, last night there was a presentation on millennials. The millennials now, they have fewer driver's licenses than any time in the last 40 years. The 18 through 24, they purchase fewer cars than any time in the last 40 years. Now the car is not a status symbol for the millennials. It's more of a status symbol, an iPad. Or to go backpacking in Australia. Or even just to pay higher rent and live in a neighborhood that have things within walking distance. So things are changing. Of course, there's going to be electric cars and hydrogen cars. A few months ago, I was invited to Google to test their driverless car. Yeah, but it's an issue of space. I mean, UPS, FedEx, they're hiring thousands of people on bicycles. Why? Because they get a big truck that goes to the middle of the downtown, and then the last kilometer or the last 5 kilometers is done by bicycles. So that's how it's being done in so many places. I mean, just imagine, just a few years ago when people said there's a narrow road and we're going to put public transit, people said, oh no, public transit doesn't fit. So we got to send transit somewhere else and have it for cars. That was the last century thinking. This century, when there is not enough space for cars and transit, then you only have transit. Yeah. We really got to do things differently. Yeah, it got to take courage, but we got to take leadership. This is the kind of things we got to do, and then invest in the public spaces. So that's why I said they got to be best friends. But of course, we got to make it nicer. You know, this is in Ontario. And so a councillor said, Gil, everybody's going to take the buses because we bought these big, nice buses. So you think anybody's going to take the bus? Well, this is what the bus stop looks like? This is 1,500 students, and this is the bus stop. So I decided to show that councillor another bus stop. And then he said, Gil, why are you showing me the bus stop? I said, because this is what it would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. We need to make walking, cycling, and transit a better option. Another anecdote, now that I know we have till 9. When I was with my 25 friends in Copenhagen last week, one night, we had a free night, and then they were getting ready to go out to party or something. And I had dinner. I was going to have dinner with the Minister of the Environment. She is an MP, a member of the Parliament at the national level. And her mom is a member of the European Parliament. And all of a sudden, these people were waiting to go out, and they see that my friend comes by on a bicycle. And her mom is on another bicycle. And I get on my bike, and then I introduce them. They were expecting that it was going to be a car with a driver and security and whatever. No, that's how they get around. They bike. It's the millionaires, the poor, the young, the old. I mean, we need that's the kind of things that we need. We need everybody to be able to walk, to bike, to take public transit. I mean, we need Steve Nash to take public transit. We need Nelly Furtado to take we need to make it cool to take public transit. If it's not cheaper or faster or more convenient, people are not going to switch. I mean, one of my brothers told me when I started working in things in cities 25, 30 years ago, he said, a developed city is not the one where the poor have cars, but the one where the rich use public transit. We need to change that concept. And we got to make walking a priority. I mean, it's just like the birds. They need to fly, or the fish need to swim. People need to walk, not only to survive, but to be happy. This is how, in so many ways, how we were created. The young people walk, the old ones, the youth, in every country. Now in Vancouver, they have these walking buses. And the speed, 30 kilometers in front of the schools. Why do we have 30 kilometers in front of the schools? Because it works. It's safer. But do we want children to be safe only in front of the school or everywhere? Why do we have 30K everywhere? So, and I said it wasn't just people walking. I said also people cycling. They are cycling, a more efficient way of walking. And it's not just for the men in spandex. It's for everybody, for the little kid learning how to balance, for the older adult in his trike. I mean, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. The infrastructure for public transit, for walking and for cycling is the symbol of the respect that we have for people. I mean, if we want to improve walkability, there is nothing as important as lowering the speed. We need to lower the speed all over BC, I mean all over the world, to 30 kilometers an hour. By the way, in New York, they approved last month at the state level. They wanted to do it citywide, but then the city said, we cannot do it, it's a state level. Sometimes people say, oh, it's municipal, we cannot do it, it's provincial. What? But then go to the province, ask the province. So New York, they went to the state, and they got it approved, 25 miles an hour as of November 7th. Every street in New York City. Not only the neighborhood, all streets, including arterials, 25 miles an hour. They wanted 20, but they also have that possibility. If any neighborhood wants to go further below, they can sign a petition and the city will lower. Not street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. Because street by street is very difficult to enforce, and even for the citizens, it's very difficult to obey. Because you don't know really when it is 20, when it is 30. But then, if you know, if I'm on an arterial, it can be 40, but as soon as I get on an arterial, it's 30. In the UK, more than 12 million people have changed in the last 6 years the communities to 30K an hour. Why? For many reasons. Why is because if you get hit at 30 kilometers an hour, there is only 5% probability that you're going to be killed. If you get hit at 50, there is 85% probability. I mean, in the US, over 75,000 people get hit by cars every year. In Toronto, a person, I don't know the numbers for Vancouver, but in Toronto, a person gets hit by a car every 3 hours and 10 minutes. And a cyclist every 7 hours and 20 minutes. So this is really critical. But it's very important not only because you lower the possibility of being killed, but also because of all the benefits. On the one hand, we got to minimize the negatives of the injuries and fatalities. But on the other hand, it's going to be so much more enjoyable to walk. When you are walking and the cars are going at 20 or 30, it's fine. But when the cars are going at 50, you don't feel at ease. And also, people start using the streets. Also, in the neighborhood streets, at less than 30, then you can mix bikes and cars and things. It changes completely our outlook. So this is very, very important. We need to lower, and this is something that should be, that's 20 miles. And also, how do we save people? Simple thing like this, we're building streets for cars, so we didn't put an island here, a median. We put a median, and we eliminate 56% of the accidents. Can you imagine if your child or your spouse or your parents get killed in an accident, and in that street there was no median, and then you found that if there had been a median, at least 56% of the accident would have been avoided. I mean, we should not be doing any road without any median in the crosswalks. Those are the kind of things. I mean, we know what needs to be done. I mean, simple things. When all the lights for the pedestrians, they gotta go 7 seconds, 5 seconds before the cars. Why? Because you are driving a car and there is someone in the corner. You are gonna make a right turn, but you don't know if that person, first, it's hard to see the person. Second, you don't know if the person is gonna cross or is just waiting for someone. But if that person, like many cities in the world, has a 5-second advantage to the car. So they get the green light, and you as a car, you still have the red light. So when you are going to start 5 seconds later, that person is either across or halfway across. So it's very, very visible. So then how much does it cost? Nothing to reprogram the lights. I mean, those are the kind of things. But if the pedestrian is the priority, that's why at 880 we're promoting a World Pedestrian Day sometime in May of next year. If anybody wants, send us an email. We need volunteers but it's around activism on these topics. If we want to improve bikeability, what do? Well, I was going to show a video, but we don't have sound, so then I'm going to skip that video. And also, we don't have time. But some cities are doing things, nice things, but not the ones that have to be done. Some are nice, some are must have. The nice, they make it more comfortable for the existing cyclists, but they don't get new cyclists. What are the nice? I mean, Toronto people have such a thin skin that when I'm going to say something bad about Toronto, first I'm going to say, oh, Toronto's so great. I love Toronto. It's the most multicultural city, and the children, they walk in the rain, and we paint in the parks, and the streets are used for so many things. And one of the things in Toronto, actually, is that the children have the right, they have clear what they want. But not the people leading the city. This is what we're doing in cycling. These sharrows that no one respects anywhere. We could do signage, all kinds of signs, bicycle parking all over the place, and bicycle lockers, and we do teach how to bike, and maps, and bike routes on the buses. And our expectations are so low that when the city increased, there was a line here, they moved it 50 centimeters, and the cyclist unions organized a party for the city staff. Man, that's when I say, when people say better than nothing, no, better than nothing usually is not better than nothing. So these are the kind of things. These lines, people don't respect the lines anywhere in the world. I mean, just think of someone that that doesn't bike on the street because it's dangerous. Would that person start cycling because we put signage or bike racks or we give out maps? No. So the two must-have are, one, we need to lower the speed in the neighborhoods. And number two, we got to create a network of bikeways. It's very, very important. One bikeway is the same thing as nothing. One bikeway is like if you're going to do a hockey arena and you don't have money, and you say, okay, this year let's do one goal. And the next year you have a little bit of money, and they say, okay, now let's do the middle. And the third year, when you're going to finish, people say, oh, no, we don't have a hockey culture because no one is playing games. Well, if you don't have the field, you're not going to play games. Same thing happens with the bikeway. So we need a network separating pedestrians and cyclists and cars and thinking of daytime and nighttime. I mean, this is Montreal. They used to have painted line, only men and mostly students. Now they put physical barriers, and now everybody's cycling. These are the kind of things that we got to change. This is Paris. Look at these gigantic sidewalks and separating. This is Mexico City. This is Vancouver. Great. So these are the kind of things. So don't waste your time in these things. You wait on the network. Now, at 880, we came up with a concept that is called minimum grid. What is the minimum grid? We came out thinking for the election in Toronto, we have elections October 27th. So we have 44 wards, and everybody was asking something in each one of the wards. Oh, we need this parking, we need this painted line. No. It's going to take us 100 years to do a network. Let's ask for the minimum grid. So we say, okay, how many bikeways do we need in Toronto to connect origin and destination? We say, we need about 500 kilometers. Okay, what is the minimum? Okay, 200. So we want to have 200 in 4 years. So we said, okay, that's the only ask. Anybody is about the minimum grid. So now everybody in the 44 wards, and we at 80, we donated, and we're putting ribbons on all the bicycles in the city so that people see a yellow ribbon around it. It says minimumgrid.ca. Go to that website. Great information. Minimumgrid.ca. So so that when we go to anyone running for council, And they say, oh, you know, are you for or against the minimum grid? Oh, no, I love bikes. No, I'm not asking you if you love bikes. I'm asking you if you are for the minimum grid. Are you for or against the minimum grid? Oh, we're going to put bicycle rings on. I'm not asking for parking. I'm asking if you are for or against the minimum grid. Now we got 2 of the 3 mayoral candidates in favor of the minimum grid, and we got hundreds of candidates for council. Let's hope that it goes through. And the minimum grid is because if we don't have a grid connecting, it's not going to click. This is Copenhagen. In the neighborhoods, the speed is low, but then they got the grid. This morning, Mayor Musaro of North Vancouver, he said that he is building a AAA bicycle network. If he builds this, it's going to be fantastic. This is Buenos Aires. I'm going to show you a little bit about Buenos Aires. I was there about 3 weeks ago. They built 133 kilometers in 3 years. The city is broke. It's almost a default. Bicycle infrastructure is very inexpensive. Same thing as pedestrian. And also, most of transit is very doable. So this is Seville. Look, no one used to bike in Seville, Spain. No one. And they said, oh, we love our cars. In the summer, it's 40 degrees. No one is going to bike. No, people didn't bike it because it wasn't safe. And they started building bikeways. In 3 years, they built 150 kilometers. You know, when it was separated, no one was biking. As soon as they started to connect, it clicked. And it went from 0.5% to 6.6. And now they want to go to 15. So these are the kind of things. I mean, when people, why do we need a network, a grid? It's like a power grid. When you're doing a power grid, you don't say, oh, in this neighborhood, yes, in the next. Well, no, it has to be citywide, the power grid, or the water grid. So the bicycle grid also has to be citywide. In Calgary, who would have thought that Calgary was going to teach Canadian cities about cycling? It's great. That's what Mayor Nench is doing. They built one bikeway, and people were not using it. So the politicians, the enemies of cycling, said, let's get rid of it. And then he said, they said, why are you going to get rid of it? They said, oh, because there are not enough cyclists. And he said, of course, we don't have cyclists because we don't have a network. So a few months ago, they approved a network downtown, and now they are building it. And he said, for 3 years, let's do the network and hire the maintenance. Plow the snow, keep it clean, whatever. State of the art for 3 years. And then if in 3 years people don't bike, okay, then we can get rid of them. But first, let's try it out for 3 years. And when you ask the politicians or the city staff for a protected bikeway, they might say, oh, but I don't see the cyclist. Why are we going to invest that money? Well, remind them of my friend Mike. He builds bridges. And I asked Mike, and he told me that no one has ever asked him to justify building a bridge by the amount of people that are swimming across the river. Nevertheless, Mike goes and builds the bridge. Same thing with the cyclists. It's the latent cyclist, the potential cyclist. I mean, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. It's not a joke. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. It's the only individual mode of mobility for every child and youth around the world. Every child and youth around the world. So walking and cycling should be a right, the right to safe and enjoyable mobility. Unless you think that only those that have the money and the age and the desire to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. And if we take away the word individual, then walking, cycling, and public transit should be a right. That's why we're talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability. Everything is linked to everything. I mean, we cannot have a bus or a streetcar with 80 people going at the speed of one car with one person. I mean, 2 days ago, I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They inaugurated a bus rapid transit 30 days ago, August 14. At peak hours, from 7 to 9:30 and from 5 to 8, dedicated lanes. Dedicated lanes. I mean, it's about democracy. If democracy works, 80 people on a bus should have the right of 80 times the space of one person on a car. So we got to think about it safe for everybody. I mean, we have 1.2 million people killed. You know, that's over 100,000 per month killed in traffic accidents around the world. 100,000 per month, including cars and motorcycles and walking. 270,000 walking. 270,000. I mean, imagine for a second. Imagine that there are 4 planes flying around the world. One over Canada, one over the US, Russia, Australia, and they crashed. And everybody died. That's today, 4 planes. And 4 tomorrow. And for the next day, there's a huge world crisis. That's how many people walking are killed every day, the equivalent of 4 Air Malaysia planes. Every day. So, what are the politicians doing? What are we citizens doing about it? Clearly, we're not doing enough. In the U.S., more people are killed walking in the last 10 years than 16 times more than the number of people that die in natural disasters. And I was telling you that in Toronto, 1 person walking every 3 hours and 15, and 1 person cycling every 7 hours. So, I mean, we got to make this zero. Everybody. We shouldn't have anybody dying in that. Let me tell you briefly before we're finished, a little bit, before immigrating to Canada, I was commissioner in Bogota. And I'm not saying that Bogota is ideal. Of course, it's decades behind most communities in BC. But I want to show you, now I advise a lot of mayors, but before I was doing. And we did things, I learned things like this. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people in 1968. And then the city put a wire fence around, and nothing happened in 27 years. Why nothing happened? Because sometimes it's harder to do things. Sometimes we don't support the politicians for doing innovative things. So what do? More of the same. Maybe a little bit better, but more of the same. Also, when people try to do something innovative, then you get some civic cadavers. What are the civic cadavers? People that you thought they were dead because they haven't shown up in years. But you start doing a sidewalk or a bikeway, or you are going to put an LRT or BRT, and they resuscitate. Not to support, but to oppose. So then people said, no sidewalks, nothing. But I learned that the citizens are paying us in the public sector every other week to get things done. Not to have 20 excuses why things cannot be done. And that's why in 27 years was like this, and 3 years we built a lake, and we built bikeways and sidewalks and places for people to walk and to run, and children's playgrounds and all kinds of things, wave pools. I mean, so many things can be done. So in the public sector, we got to become champions at finding solutions to the problems and not problems to the solutions. We built 280 kilometers of protected bikeways in 3 years and went from less than 0.5% to more than 5%, and these were some of them. In some areas, they were so poor that in BC, you couldn't even imagine, even in your worst nightmare, how poor they were. And look at how it changed these people's life when people can walk or bike. Why do we need good quality bikeways and good quality sidewalks? Part of it is safety, but part of it is to dignify the pedestrian, dignify the cyclist, as well as the photos that we saw. So, yeah, this one, it was, when we say issue priorities, we didn't have money for everything. So we had money either for walking and cycling or cars. And we said, the cars, a future administration will take care of the cars. Ciclovia, you got to have in every community. It's great because it changes minds. When I became commissioner, there were only a few kilometers. We increased to 121, and from a few thousand people to more than 1.3 million. It changes mindset because all of a sudden it tells people, the streets are public space, can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year, and then people go on and use it, and it's great for physical activity. Public health is such a fantastic ally in this because this is about public health. With Robert Wood Johnson, we're going to go to Guadalajara with some leaders to see how to create a circle of champions to promote open streets all over North America. Because you get everybody. It's like an exercise in social integration. You get the rich and the poor and the young and the old, everybody. Actually, when I was inspired on the Ciclovia on parks, I was reading Frederick Olmsted that designed most of the important parks in North America. And I was reading that when he did Central Park 160 years ago, he said, in New York, everybody hated everybody. The blacks and the whites, the immigrants and the locals, the rich and the poor. But he said, they don't know each other. They don't live in the same building. Their kids don't go to the same school. We need to create places where people can meet each other as equals. And the open street is like a Central Park that everybody can have. When my brother was mayor, this is the Japanese cooperation, quote-unquote, agency was proposing $10 billion to do elevated highways. He said no. This was what traffic used to look like. And he said, I want to do a bus rapid transit. Even the World Bank that was going to fund it didn't believe him. He said, what? It's going to cost 1/20th, but it's going to be like a subway above the ground? And actually, that's what he did. A BRT called Transmilenio. In 36 months, from idea to implementation. This moves more people than 90% of the subways in the world. More than 90% of the subways at 1/20th of the cost. By the way, when we were taking a look at those bikeways, when we were doing those bikeways, was really bold because there was no city in all of the America, North, South, Central America, that had done even 1 inch of bikeway. When we did those, we spent $90 million. At the same time, another city in the country was doing a subway, $2.5 billion. And today and then, the $90 million bikeways move more people than the $2.5 billion subway. So when I say that cycling is not a joke, it's not a joke. But also this, at 1/20th, it moves more than 90% of the subways of the world. Actually, the BRT in Guangdong in China moves more people than any of the subways in China, except line number 2 in Beijing. So this is, but of course, you got to do it right. Sometimes the problem with the BRTs is that politicians think that just because it has wheels and looks like a big car, then they can cut corners and they don't let the technical people make the right decisions. But the connectivity with the cyclists, public transit and walking and cycling, they gotta be best friends. So you gotta be able to go, leave your bike, take public transit, and come back in the afternoon and find the bike. And then improve the public spaces around there. And now I'm with 880 cities. With 880 cities, one of the things I love is the possibility to come here and chat with you. I've been working in over 180 different cities. Don't worry, I know you're getting tired. I'm not going to give you an example from each one of them. Just 2 examples I want to show you. Oh, one is that this is probably not a politician. Why? Because part of it is our fault. That instead of praising the politician that is gutsy, we get so on top of them if they make a mistake that then they just do more of the same. But like Einstein said, we cannot solve the problem by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. So we got to change. This morning I was invited to talk at VeloWorks, so I wanted to show him a city of 190,000 people, how they bike. They did a study on mobility, walking, cycling, public transit, cars, everything. They thought about it, the people in the winter and the people in the summer, people going to work, people going to study. There's 190,000. Look, they consulted people through the internet. Citizen engagement is critical. In the small streets, now cars go only one way, but walking and cycling in both ways. Anytime there is a lot of cars, there's a physical separation between the cars, the cyclists, and the pedestrian, so that it's safe for everybody. And then they count. When I took the photo, 7,803 had gone by that day. At midnight, it goes to 0. So you know every day how many people are going by. And at what times are they going by? This was a person that I brought. Now she's the Secretary of the Environment in Mexico City. And at that time, she was just pumping air. You know, you got a lot of tourists in Vancouver and Victoria, all over BC. Then people come by, and then in the maps, they type, you know, where do they want to go? Where there's a coffee shop, and then it lights up where the coffee shop, and the lockers, and toilets, so that you don't have to go to Tim Hortons just because you want to go to the public toilet. Underground bicycle parking. I mean, little details like this. For example, this one has music. And I say, why do you have classical music? They say, because it's on the basement of the building. And on the basement, you hear small cracks. And so then, with the classical music, it tames the noise. And the pedestrian streets, either you leave your bikes out or you walk your bikes in. So all of this. And remember when I said that, you know, the 30 kilometers an hour in front of the schools? Here is not 30 kilometers an hour. It's 0 kilometers an hour. In front of the schools, there are no cars from 7 a.m. till 4 p.m. And also, they put a lot of these little games where the kids jump from one to the other. So the kids are eager to go to school and see their friends because the whole street in front of the school is open to the kids and is closed to cars. So they arrive a few minutes early and they play games on the street. So it's creating cities that are nice for the 8 and for the 80. So that's all ends. So why are we talking about these things? Because of the benefits. Now that you're going to have a referendum, don't talk about transit. I tell people, if you want to promote cycling, don't talk about cycling. If you're going to promote transit, don't talk about transit. Talk about the benefits. I mean, if Air Canada wants us to go to Jamaica, what do they show in the commercial? Do they show us all crammed up on the plane? Picking up the bag and not finding it because someone stole it? No, they show us people in the beach beautiful women in bikinis and having margaritas, and we got to work on the benefits. Cleaner air. Walking, cycling, and public transit has fewer gas emissions than any other mode. But not every politician, not every citizen is into the environment. So we got to tell it's going to improve mobility by itself because we can take public transit or walk or bike to places. You know, and when people say, oh, here everybody drives a car, now we say no, you know. Even in the wealthiest community, more than 30% people do not drive cars. It contributes to make transit better. How are people going to get? Walking, cycling, is the connectivity of transit is totally in sync. It's going to make us healthier. Is this what the future looks like? You know, the issue of obesity is horrible because we got heart attacks, respiratory problems, depression, anxiety, and all of these things. I mean, there is no health system in the world that is going to survive if it's only curative. It has to be preventive. And when people walk or bike as a normal part of every day, but also when people take public transit, walking, cycling, and taking public transit. I mean, in Canada, it's getting worse and worse, the issue of obesity year after year. When they hear my accent, they say, oh, Gil, it's always been like this. No, it's not always been like this. And diabetes, look at how diabetes is increasing. In the region of Peel, that is just outside of Toronto, where Mississauga and Brampton are, today 1 in 10 adults are diabetic. In 20 years, it's going to be 1 in 6. I mean, public health is, by the way, when you're going to promote anything, like transit or walking or cycling, bring public health. Because sometimes people say, oh, that's fun and games. But when you come with the medical officer on board, saying, yeah, it's fun and games, but it's also about life and death. They have so much. We need to create broad alliances in all of this. For example, this is about calories in, calories out. I mean, now you don't have to do a marathon. It's only 30 minutes a day of physical activity. No wonder they say physical activity is the wonder drug. Another wonder drug is public transit. In Australia, they did a study. If you use public transit, on average, you do 41 minutes of physical activity. And you don't even notice. Why? Because you walk to or bike to public transit. That's 10 minutes. And then from transit to work. You do the same in the afternoon. You did more than your 30 minutes a day. So you get home, you can do whatever you want. You go running, but it's out of enjoyment, not because you're going to do physical activity. Or you can spend time with the kids or whatever. In the US, the same thing. They did a study, and 19 minutes spent walking each day. So it's also good for economic development. When you are walking, cycling, or taking public transit, how much can you carry? You carry only for 2 or 3 days. So you buy local. When you are in a car, how much you buy? For 2 or 3 weeks. So you go to big box stores. So it's also going to improve our income. When people say, I don't care about the environment, I don't care, what's in it for me? Well, how come people don't have money for anything? People don't have money for retirement, vacation, and clothing, and entertainment. Why? What are the people doing with their money? This is the 2-car households. This is something really important in the referendum. The 2-car households are spending between 25 and 30% of the income on mobility. $1 out of $4. $1 out of $4 of income is going into mobility in the 2-car household. They would be spending only 5% if they only use public transit and walk and bike. 5%. I mean, there is nothing any politician can do to improve the situation of a family, of a 2-car household, than to be able to downsize to 1 car. Or the 1 car to downsize to 0. Nothing can have as much impact. So we got to do whatever it takes to do that. Look, in Washington, D.C., they eliminated 15,000 cars, putting car sharing and all kinds of things. What did they do? They are saving $127 million every year. Every year. So it's not only good for the person, it's good for the local economy. Why? Because if all of a sudden you got $7,000 in your pocket, what do? You go to the restaurants, you go to the pubs, you improve your basement, you plant flowers in the garden. So instead of paying for cars built in China or Mexico, you are investing in your local economy. So it's going to be good also for the local economy. So this is really important. So all of this is about how do we want to live. You know, sometimes this is how we dream, how we want to live. It's kind of funny. We work 51 weeks of the year to have 1 week of vacation, and we go to a walkable place. But then we build a non-walkable place. It's scary, the kind of things that we are building. You know, this is Florence in Italy, and this is Atlanta. At the same scale, 1 intersection on a highway. That's what we are doing. I mean, there is change. So how do we move from talking to doing? Well, There are 5 elements. I'm going to go quickly through each one. Sense of urgency. I mean, if this didn't create a sense of urgency that we need to learn how to live, so it's very clear. When we define our city around cars, what do we get? We get more cars. And then we have to invite our friends to help us cross the street. The streets are getting wider and the cars are going faster. So what do? We build more highways. We build more roads. When the people at Google were showing me the driverless car, I said, look, even with a driverless car, there is just not enough space. And this is what so many cities are doing. I mean, thinking that we're going to solve congestion by building more roads is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It doesn't work. So what do we need to do? We need to build the cities around people and get healthier and happier people. And then we're going to have better quality of life. And why quality of life is so important? Because when we live in a more globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere. The best carpenter, the best magician, the best engineer, the best medical doctor. However you define best, they can live anywhere in the world. So every morning we got to wake up in our cities. How can we retain our best people? How can we attract the best people? Quality of life has become the most important tool of economic competitiveness. Second, we got to have political will. I mean, political will, this is just to tell you that change is hard. 8 years ago in Paris, they didn't even know what a public bike was. All of a sudden, now they got Velib everywhere. They have 1,451 stations. 100 meters in 150 meters in any direction, you have a station. But to do this, the mayor eliminated over 5,000 parking. You think that was easy? In 1 year? I mean, here you're going to take 3 cars, and everybody goes up, and they're going to take 3 cars. To put 40 bikes for the business. Then they realized that much better than having 4 cars is having 50 bikes. And then that's how they started going. Now they're having almost 200,000 bike rides per day. I mean, in Melbourne, I'm just going to show a couple of images in Melbourne, because in Melbourne, 30 years ago, Melbourne would not have been in the top 300 cities in the world. Now it's in the top 5, competing with Vancouver all the time, which is the best city. Some of the things they did, pouring public art and planting trees. I mean, everything is related to everything. When you plant trees, it's not only good for the environment, it's good for business, it's good for walking, for cycling, it's good for public health, it's good for the quality of the air. And again, public transit, how to get more public transit so that people can get from one place to the other. And these kind of things, how to improve public places, those laneways that were so dark and dangerous, how they changed this into this. These are some of the things that they were doing. No one wanted to live downtown. It was like a donut city. People would go and work and live. Now everybody wants to live downtown. This is what's happening in Canada also. Both the millennials and the boomers are going into the cities. And the kind of things that they are doing. And in the suburbs, what are they doing in the suburbs? Public transit. So they are densifying the suburbs, but only 7%. Wherever they're going to put a bus rapid transit or a light rail, they densify. You know, these people are like, think of this image. These people are slaves to the car because there is nothing within walking distance other than houses. If they want an ice cream, they got to get on a car. If they want a book, they got to get on a car. So what is going to happen? They're going to put public transit here. So next to public transit, they're going to densify. They're changing the land use. Public transit and land use are 2 sides of the same coin. So now these people, within walking distance, they're going to be able to buy coffee or get a book or go to a restaurant. Why? Because now you have the density to have not only public transit, but also to have business. But also, sometimes when people think of density, they don't think of 4 stories or 5 stories. When they're thinking of density, they think of the 40-story building. And they say, I don't want this in my neighborhood. Any of these schemes have the same. You can have the same density with 5 stories next to each other than with 40 stories 100 meters from each other. And it's so much more human when the buildings are low. So these are some of the kind of things. We need leadership. And not only from these world leaders, but leadership like this friend that is a physical education teacher. She saw fewer kids were walking to school. So when the kids 2 years ago went home on holidays, they came back and she was dressed up as a pylon. She shut down the parking lot. And she created 4 drop-off zones no less than half a kilometer from the school. And minus 24, which you don't really know in BC what minus 24 is. And they were walking and they were cycling. So we need hundreds of Fentons, because part of it is infrastructure, but part of it is programs, it's uses, doers. I mean, 2 weeks ago I was in Buenos Aires. Look what they're doing in Buenos Aires, not only dancing tango in the public streets, but these are the Commissioner of Transportation, and she's not the director of alternative transportation, of active transportation, no, she's healthy transportation, the director of healthy transportation. And look what they're doing, pedestrian streets. All over Buenos Aires, they're building these pedestrian streets for the older adults, for the young. They have done 100 new street blocks with 10 kilometers an hour speeds. What is 10 kilometers an hour? Basically, it's a pedestrian street. When people say, complete streets. No, complete streets is not that everybody has the same right. No, this is a street that is a pedestrian street where you allow the cars if they come under the rules of the pedestrian. 10 kilometers, and they go slow, and they got bumps. Look at the bikeways that they're doing. They're not perfect from the technical point, but their goal was connectivity. So they built 130 kilometers in less than 3 years. And they're putting public bikes. The mayor himself goes on a bike ride every month, a huge bike ride to remind people that the cyclists exist, to make cyclists visible. And they increase 1,000% the use of bikes, from less than 0.3% to more than 3%. And now they're building another 150 kilometers, and they want to go to 10%. Already 12% ride bikes at least once a week. And look how important, not copy and paste, but adapt and improve. They went to New York, they saw what New York was doing in the sidewalks, they go back to Buenos Aires, and look what they're doing in Buenos Aires. Exactly the same things. Taking space away from the cars and giving space to the people. Initially as pilot projects, very fast, they do it overnight. And then for 2-year pilot project. If it works, then they make it permanent and they do more infrastructure. A BRT, 38 kilometers. In less than 3 years. And it's moving 650,000 people, this BRT. 650,000. And by the way, since you have elections in November, tell the politicians that the mayor of Buenos Aires was running, and the main opposing candidate, he said, one of his slogans was, if I win, I'll get rid of all the bikeways. And he lost terribly. I mean, I don't care who wins or doesn't win here. But hopefully, whoever wins will be in favor of public transit, of walking and cycling. Because this is not about left or right. This is about cities. This is not it's about making sense. And last public engagement, we got to engage the citizens. We got to go and listen, because the citizens are magnificent. And here in the cities, it cannot be just tokenism, doing some meetings at the wrong time, at the wrong place. People don't want to go to City Hall at 7 p.m. on a weekday, so we got to find out. We created this is about spice. Remember the spiceless city? This is a spice city, when there are so many activities and so many things to do. And then when you are there, citizens come with hundreds of ideas, so it's something that is really, really exciting. So these are the 5 elements. So I just want to end by inviting you to let's think outside the box. Walking, cycling, and public transit got to be best friends. We got to create cities for everyone. It's a wonderful time to create alliances between transportation and planning and public health and environment and economic development and the boards of education, between municipalities and provincial and federal government, between everybody, the private and the public and the NGOs and everybody. There are some challenges, but more than challenges, what we have is great opportunities. Let's keep in mind that it's not a financial issue, it's not a technical issue, it's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. So today we talk about sustainable mobility and some streets and sidewalks and other public places, but tomorrow we got to walk the talk. So I think we got a wonderful opportunity. I wish you all the very best. Thank you. We have time for a few questions.
The people who are very powerful are getting tremendous amount of tax dollars to build bridges, and they want to build more subways. And you see this, like you said, everywhere, and we know they cost this huge amount of money. And then politically, that's where I don't know if they're all friends and they're all going to make a lot of money or something. You would imagine so. But that's where we feel so helpless to get anything, to say, bike lanes are too expensive. You'll hear people say that in this town. It's a shock. But people don't seem to have that numerical kind of literacy. I've been trying to figure out how to show 1 billion to children, like grains of sand in a bucket. How big is that? Do you have any ideas about how we can?
I have a few. First, I congratulate you. I think you got a very important question. Also, she said at the end one very important comment. She's trying to think how to show children what $1 billion is. Sometimes people don't get what $1 billion is. Actually, one of the things more stupid that Rob Ford did in Toronto was to give back the car registration. It was only $60. But people got in their mind, they understand what $60 is. They don't understand what $1 billion is. But $60, which is really stupid because $60, when you got 1 million cars, $60 is 60 million, so you can do something. If you don't like what they're doing with the 60 million, do something else. But when you give it back, people 60, that's $5 a month. You get a coffee and a muffin, or maybe not even a good coffee, a month. So what do you do with that? It's ridiculous. But people got the concept. He's going to give back the car registration, like $60. So that's a challenge. How do you show that? And the issue, let me tell you, and it's not only Ford. The previous mayor also, he came up with a transit plan, transit city, all across Toronto. Great. $6 billion. And people said, are you crazy? Where are you going to get $6 billion? 4 weeks later, he's signing with the provincial government and the federal government a subway, an extension of the subway in Vaughan in Toronto, that thanks to all of you, you are paying for it. It's 2.6 billion. 2.6. They could have done 8 kilometers, very low density where there is nothing. In those 8 kilometers, they could have done the state-of-the-art LRT, light rail, for $300 million. And they would have left $2.3 billion to do all of his transit city. He could have had 40% of the transit city under construction. What happens? He didn't have anything on. So when Ford came, there was nothing under construction, only plans. And then Ford said, oh, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like transit city, so transit city is dead. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, the thing of the subway is you can do, with the same amount of money, you can do 1 kilometer of subway, or you can do 4 of light rail, or you can do 15 or 20 of bus rapid transit. And at the end of the day also, one line doesn't solve anything. You need a network. So unless you have the money to do the network of subways, but also when I was talking about happiness, when you ask people, if you could go at the same speed above ground or below ground, 9 out of 10 prefer to go above ground. Only the rats prefer to go underground. 9 out of 10 also. 1 out of 10 prefer to go above. Because people want to see the trees and the sun and it's also, but some of it, that's why all of us got to become very creative on the referendum. In Toronto, there is an LRT being under construction in a road that is called Eglinton. And part of it is going to be underground. The businesses were in favor, were proposing to make it underground. Can you imagine? You are going to put 40,000 people in front of their noses every day, one way and then back. And they wanted to go underground. I said, it doesn't make sense. All of a sudden, you get these people underground, they go underground over 5, 6, 7 stations, and they come up. They only see what's around these 2 stations. If they were going around, they could stop anytime. They could see when you put up a sign, sale, clearance, the new fashion in, or whatever. So that's when I say citizens can no longer be spectators. Citizens need to participate. Citizens need to go to the meetings at city council. They need to go to participate in politics, write letters to the editor, send emails to elected officials. We got to become as visible as possible and try to come with the best possible arguments. Yes?
What letter grade would you give the Metro Vancouver area for its efforts so far?
In what? In walking?
Physical infrastructure and what we hope to achieve.
I think what you hope is very good. I think what you hope is B+. No, maybe even an A-. But I think that the plans are excellent. I think the plans are very good. I think cycling is not very good. Overall, the metro area is mediocre for cycling. It's very, very dangerous. There have been some steps. One of the things with cycling is that it is very dangerous to stop halfway when you start doing. You need to do a grid, and you start doing the grid, and then people start complaining, and then you stop. It's very dangerous. Why? Because the people that you're not going to get that many new cyclists, so the people that are against it, oh, you see, you're wasting your money. We don't see the cyclists. And then the people that wanted the grid are also not happy because you didn't finish the grid. No, once you start, close your eyes and you gotta finish the grid. Because when you have, like the grid that I showed from Seville, when they started doing bikeways, it was increasing, but only bits by bits. As soon as you started connecting the network, it clicked, and a lot of people were using it. So I think that there have been some very good efforts on the bridge and some big fights that all previous governments had not had the guts to do. But I think that overall in the region, I think walking is really good. It can improve. There's also some intersections that are very dangerous. It's improving. Fewer people are being killed now. Still too many injuries. Not enough people. Most politicians don't even know what are the injuries. I asked today some mayors and councillors about the numbers. No idea. That happens in Toronto as well. I haven't seen one councillor that realizes that we have a pedestrian hit by cars every 3 hours and 10 minutes. Reported to the police. It's many, many more, because sometimes the car hits you. I mean, the other day I was riding my bike and I was hit by the mirror of a truck. I just go up to the window and I insult the guy, and then and I keep going. I'm not going to waste 2 hours reporting the guy. So the things reported to the police is maybe when it's really, really bad. No, I think there is a lot of good plans in the greater Vancouver, in everything, in walking, in cycling, in transit. I think it needs the support. I think the citizens really have to get on board. Somehow, it seems to be easier to get the people that are against things, the civic cadavers, to be loud, and we needed the people that are in favor of things to be. I think it's very important to create alliances. Today, I met with some wonderful people from public health, from both Fraser and the Vancouver. And I said, look, you got to be involved in this. This has to do with your daily work. We need to get the boards of education on board. We need to get the businesses. For example, the Chamber of Commerce in Toronto is one of the most pro-public transit. They have been doing all kinds of studies why it's good for the city. But of course, we only have so much money. So, and if we don't participate, what happens in Toronto, in Scarborough, low density, where a light rail would have been more than enough, this mayor ran through everybody, $1 billion more. I mean, that $1 billion could have been spent in many other ways. Okay. What else? Also, if anybody has ideas on how to amalgamate, how to get the citizens, because I totally agree that citizens cannot be spectators. Yes?
What do you think about removing cars from cities altogether?
Removing cars altogether? Well, that's impossible. Wishful thinking. But it's happening in many places. In Paris, all the downtown is becoming pedestrian. We saw all of these streets in Buenos Aires becoming pedestrian. And it's very tough because developing countries, the car is even more of a status symbol. So it's a huge fight to take away. So I think the car is going to play a role, but you should be able not to have a car if you choose to. You should not have to be obligated almost to have a car or just be out. So you should be able to have within walking distance all the basic needs from any home. So the car is not going to disappear, but the role of the car is changing very, very rapidly. Some people are saying, oh, the driverless car. The driverless car has many issues. For example, we might end up seeing more driverless cars going around, peopleless cars. You come here, you are late, there is no parking, so you just program your driverless car just to go around in circles till you come out. Or to go back to your home and come back, so you just program. So what are you going to do with the peopleless driverless car? So it's also many people that might drive less now that they don't have to drive, they might use it more. So what else? Yes?
I have a question, just what 880 comes from. What does that
and 80. The 8-year-old is an indicator species. It's not 8 to 80, but it's an indicator species. If the city that we build is good for an 8 and good for an 80-year-old, then it's going to be good for everybody. So whenever you analyze, when you're doing a school and they're building a school, the entrance to the school, is it safe for an 8? Is it safe for an 80? If not, it's not good enough. Everything. The cities have to be great for everybody, not only for the 30-year-olds. Yes?
What do you think of the proposed use of the Broadway line? Have you heard about, what do you think about the proposed Broadway rapid transit line?
I don't have the total elements. I will say just in general, I think the subways are extremely expensive. Very, very few cities in the world are doing subways. Places like New York, the mayor of New York just came out and said they are doing 20 bus rapid transit lines. Not one subway, nothing, not one centimeter of subway, because it's too expensive. So he said, okay, we got some spots where we don't have public transit. How are we going to fill that? Bus rapid transit. I think the problem with the bus rapid transit, as I was saying, is that sometimes when they see that it has wheels, then everybody has an opinion. So the spouse of the commissioners have an opinion. The children have an opinion. Everybody has just maybe because you can go and kick the wheel and you think you know about it. So instead of saying, so then also a friend has a store and says, oh, don't put the stop in front of my store. They say, okay, move it 100 meters. So it's not as technical. When they're doing a train, they say it's a technical decision. So I think that when they are done properly, they can be fantastic. The bus rapid transit or the light rail. The issue is the money. I mean, there's only so much money to go around. So if we invest all of it in a mode that it costs 4 times more than another or 20 times more than the other, then we're not going to have enough money to create a grid. We're not going to have enough money for parks, for schools, for health. So this is also an issue of trade-offs. The numbers that I've seen is that easily a good BRT or a good light rail could carry that capacity without any problem. But then it also becomes part of an ego. That's what happened in Toronto last year with the subway on the LRT on Scarborough. I mean, it was so obvious that it should have been an LRT. Part of it is the fault of Metrolinx, that is the entity that handles this, that they think that they are quiet, they don't participate, they don't talk, they don't have any opinion. I think they should be leading, they should be educating people. The LRT was going to have 7 stops. The subway is going to have only 3. The LRT, there's 3 priority low-income neighborhoods along the way. The LRT was going to stop in every one of the 3. The subway doesn't stop in any. The LRT was going to, there's a university with over 10,000 students. The LRT was going to have a station right in the middle of the college. The subway is going to be 2 kilometers. So, and nevertheless, I mean, they should have just gone to the university. That's one of the things they did in Grand Rapids that I mentioned in Michigan. They have a great link between the public transit agency and the universities. So whenever they have the referendums, the millennials go out and send emails and send texts and Twitters, and they become very active around it. So we need to activate the people around these issues. And then just because, subway. I mean, they even asked the mayor, do you know what an LRT is? He couldn't even say what an LRT was. So, yes?
When you talk about activating people, how can ordinary people, say like the people in this room, mobilize better so that politicians do take notice and we have an ability to create change?
Okay, how many of you have sent an email to an elected official in the last 3 months? Wow, even though it seems very low, 10%, is more than most audiences that I have anywhere. That's really good. How many have sent one in the last year? Well, that's how you mobilize. You got to get everybody. You got to spend a little bit of time saying both when they make a mistake as well as when they do something right. They are also human. So if they did a really nice improvement on public space, if they created in the summer this, they closed a street and made a lot of festivals, send them an email. Send an email to your counselor. They also like to get a pat on the back. All of us are human. We get like to. So let's call up the radio. Whenever there is a discussion, call up the radio stations. Go to the public meetings. Support politicians that are aligned with your ideas. I mean, if you are not making the calls, if you are not sending the emails, if you are not writing letters to the editor, someone else is, and that someone else is setting the agenda. So it's very, very important to participate in any of those or many other ways. Like one of the things I want to do around the Pedestrian Day, the World Pedestrian Day, is something around activism to how to, like you said, how to get people to, a child to understand $1 billion. It's also how to get people to understand that this, I mean, this thing, sometimes this is not left or right. In Toronto, there was an issue. They were blaming the people that want walking, cycling, or transit as left. And they were talking about the pedestrians. 4 weeks ago, really, really sad, a beautiful 7-year-old girl is crossing the street, is hit by a car, she's killed. She's the daughter of the president of the Conservative Party at the national level of Canada. It's left, and it's right, and it's rich, and it's poor, and we got to make the city safe and enjoyable for everyone. This has no political colors. Also, we got to get the politicians from all parties to promote this idea. This has to be city policy. Transit cannot change. It's amazing. Now in Toronto, we got 3 different candidates for mayor. Each one, even though Metrolinx has spent our taxpayers' money, millions in studies, each one of the candidates has their own transit plan. If I win, I'm going to do this. What do you mean? It's like if they were like little kids drawing on a map. But each one has something that is totally different than what Metrolinx has. So part of this is getting into the conversation and telling them, you got to be serious. These are technical issues. It's not. Okay, last 2 questions. Yes?
I'm curious if you have any suggestions for reducing speed limits, specifically around schools. You did talk about that, and I know I'm quiet. So my daughter and my son both go to an elementary school that's on an arterial road, and there are several schools it's on Broadway. And we've spoken to city representatives about reducing the speeds, and we come up against a lot of backlash because it's an arterial. And I'm wondering if you have recommendations for school groups, parents, children even, for how to approach that and really reflect how important it is to reduce those speed limits for children of all ages.
Yeah, it's very important. Kids are not only getting killed, but even psychologically are being affected. There's nothing that scares a child more than when you tell, oh, watch out, a car is coming. They are frightened. I think that something that I recommend, get the media involved. The politicians are terrified of the media. Actually, I'm surprised. One of the things that I did not expect that it would happen in Canada when I immigrated to Canada was that the politicians in general, not all, but in general, are very scared of the media. They seem very weakling. They don't hold their positions when they are difficult positions. So get the media on board. And I recommend, when you send a letter to the editor, don't put your name. Put 10 names. If you have 10 names, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be published. If it has one. Same thing when you write a letter to the mayor of the city. Get 9 other people to sign it. When you have 10 signatures, you will get a reply from the mayor directly. You will get a phone call. So become very visible. So when you are doing something about this school, this is really an issue of life or death. We cannot wait. Like this, where this little girl was killed. So now the councilor is really focused on how to improve that intersection. That's not the problem. The other day, the chief of police came out in Toronto and said, when there were like 3 pedestrians killed in 2 days. And then he said, the problem is that there is not a pattern. Because it's in the daytime, it's at nighttime, it's on the weekdays, it's on the weekends, it's in the downtown, it's in the suburbs. I said, what do you mean there's not a pattern? Of course there's a pattern. The pattern is that we have a citywide issue, and we need to come up with solutions that are citywide. It would be easier if we said, it's only in the big intersections, or it's only at nighttime, or it's only Friday nights. No, it's all the time. So my suggestion is that if they don't pay attention, get the media involved, and it's very, very helpful. Yes?
Do you think the Vancouver's fit for bike share, and do you think Translate can take that on?
Do I think that what?
Vancouver's fit for bike share? A bike share program, and do you think Transit
the problem
should
is
take
the
it on?
helmet. Since helmet is mandatory, I haven't seen any bike share in the world. that is successful where helmets are mandatory. I've seen the one in Melbourne. And then they started, no one was using bike share, and they got all of the bikes. So then they started selling helmets at $5 at the 7-Elevens closest to the station. First, people are still not using it. Second, for how long can you subsidize a really good helmet? The cost might be $15. They could probably retail for $60 when you sell them at $5. And then people are throwing them away. So people don't carry them to take it to the next time they ride their bike. So I've seen it also in places like Adelaide, also in Australia. In Adelaide, it's also mandatory, and the helmets are tied to the bike. And people say, no, I don't want to use it. That's like using someone else's underwear. People have sweated and things. So it's very, very hard. I think that. But at the end of the day, one recommendation that I have is that the bicycle is not the issue. When I said about the things nice to have, I think bike share in some ways fits into that category. I mean, the only good thing about bike share is that they become very visible, such as in New York when you got all of those bike sharing. And also, but that is like a second phase. First is about building the network. The new bike share in Copenhagen that started this year, they've had bike share for 20 years. But the new bikes this year, all of them have like an iPad and a GPS, so you get on the bike and you just click and you write where you want to go, and then it takes you, and all of the gears and brakes are inside. But the reality is this. The city, you got to fight for the things that you cannot do for yourself. If you don't find parking, it's okay. You tie your bike to a bench or something. If you don't, the map, you Google the map. The teaching, you learn how to bike. The bicycles are so inexpensive. With the money that you save on a month of transit or a month of a car or whatever, you go to a garage sale and you buy a used bike or a stolen bike or whatever. So the issue is not the bike. What you cannot do for yourself is to have the greater protected bike lane. So I think that is where all of the emphasis, all of the advocacy around cycling has to be, is on lowering this. But the lowering the speed is critical. The lowering the speed is not only for cycling, it's for everything. It's for walking. It's for mental health, for physical health. All of the same people go and they meet. It's because lowering the speed and sidewalks is very important. Keep in mind, sidewalks, and someday you're going to invite me to talk about parks and this, but sidewalks are the cousins of the parks, not of the streets. The sidewalks behave more like parks. When we go to the sidewalk, that is where we meet friends. That's where we get to know our neighbors. That's where we develop relationships. So everywhere I go, people say, "Oh, Gil, how wide should the sidewalks be?" That's not an issue for an engineer. I mean, in 2 meters, maybe people fit. But in 4 meters, people make friends. And in 8 meters, people have a party. So maybe we should have sidewalks of 8 meters so everybody will have parties. So this is a little bit also what this is about. Is thinking outside the box. But keep in mind, I just want you to end by saying, keep in mind, better than nothing usually is not. You got to be really ambitious. You got to really think of a city that you want to live in, and you want your children and your parents and everybody to live in. And public transit is absolutely critical now that you are coming up to the referendum. But also before the referendum, you are coming to a municipal election all across BC. Participate as much as possible. Become as visible. I mean, don't give up. Don't take no for an answer. So I think there's many wonderful opportunities. And the biggest barrier that you have is that you have nice city. So people are more reluctant to change when things are nice. They say, "Oh, we're already okay." The Economist has their rankings, and they said that we are the best city in the world. By the way, the Economist doesn't say that you are the best city in the world, but you take it for granted. What the Economist says is that it's the best city for senior executives of the multinational corporations to live in. Okay? It's very, very important because people get it wrong. So they are not saying which city has the best quality of life. So they did a ranking because a lot of the people that read The Economist, they are worried about that. So companies are moving from one place to the other. So if I'm IBM and I'm thinking, where should I set up a headquarters, then I go to the ranking of The Economist. And that's what they're measuring. And The Economist is not lying. They don't say it's the best quality or no. They're saying it's the best quality of life for seniors, executives, or the large corporations. And then Vancouver and Melbourne and whatever. Of course, Vancouver is also in some of the best ranking in many others. But actually, sometimes it would be good if somehow you had a ranking and then it said, Vancouver, when you say, how is it? Impeccability, you are 48th or you are 113th. Because then we got to do better. But when all of a sudden they tell you, oh no, you are the third best in Canada. You got to keep in mind that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king. So in cycling, you are the one-eyed person. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thanks, Gil. One thing I'd like to emphasize that you mentioned is give positive feedback to politicians. They are human. Or even to TransLink. It's human too. So if you like this series, if you'd like to see more of it, let them know. And Gil, we have taped this. It's been on a webcast, but it'll also be on our site afterwards. So everything that you said, if people want to see it again, they'll have that opportunity, and we'll certainly use it to get it out there. Thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you at the next one. Great. That's good. By the way, 1 million seconds is just under 12 days.